Hi, my name is EJ Dawson. I write sci-fi, fantasy, paranormal and romance, and I'm excited to be invited to the Australian Book Lovers podcast for a special panel on sci-fi writing. I look forward to talking to you, the hosts and other guests, about the future of sci-fi writing, pun intended. Looking forward to seeing you there.
Once upon a time. Welcome to Australian Book Lovers, your destination for imagination.
Waminyeka, a big warm welcome to everyone and a huge thank you for joining us for the Australian Book Lovers podcast. Our mission is to bring fabulous Australian and Indigenous literature that spans a whole range of genres to book lovers around the globe, as well as fantastic resources and information for passionate authors looking to write their next bestseller. I'm Veronica Strachan, aka V.E. Patton, fantasy, memoir and picture book writer, reader, and one of your co-founders and hosts for today. This episode number 58, coming to you from Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung country.
And I am Darren Kazenko, dystopian science fiction and horror author, avid reader, which of course makes me a book lover, and one of your co-founders and co-hosts for the Australian Book Lovers podcast, coming to you today from Kaurna country on a slightly chilly day. Definitely the kisses from Antarctica are still coming aplenty.
That is a nice way to think about it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. I think the same could be said for Tasmania and Melbourne. I think when those Arctic winds come up, they're bone-rattlingly cold and freezing, and makes things a little bit uncomfortable if you get caught short out in the weather. But at the same time, how fresh is it? It is like coming from such a stunning place, that weather. So yes, I like to think of those winds as Antarctic kisses. But yes, coming today from Kaurna country for the fabulous, fantastic episode number 58. So we are still charging along.
We are, and in fact, wanted to share with our listeners that we have had more than 4,000 downloads of the podcast. So thank you, not only from Darren and myself, but from all the authors that you have listened to share their work and tell you about their inspiration and talk to you about what they think of life, the universe and everything, which is 95 plus hours of listening entertainment. Can you believe 95 hours, Darren?
Yes, I can believe it, because as we were discussing just a moment ago, 95 hours of finished product, obviously, usually you can times that by 3, so give or take 280 hours of editing, so I don't know how many weeks that is, so about 2.5 months, I suppose, but 2.5 months of solid editing, and but that means a wonderful opportunity, to learn the craft slowly. I'm still very much a beginner, but it's just a fantastic opportunity to learn the craft of podcasting, of editing. I love, discovering new ways to use these, fantastic digital tools that we have at our fingertips that, it's just amazing. Yeah, it can be a little bit of a learning curve sometimes, but it's so great. And obviously, the huge motivation and the fueling energy behind all of that, of course, is just the fantastic opportunity to talk with so many amazing Australian authors, to chat with you about all things books and themes and all sorts. It's just books. Wonderful. So, and I love the idea that moving forward, we hopefully we get bigger and better, but I'll learn more, we'll learn more, and and I hope I hope our listenership grows, and I hope that book lovers and authors out there find things that perk their interest and maybe motivate them into new pathways, whether it be writing or trying different approaches in their story creation, or discovering different authors, or trying different genres. So it's all about learning, it's all about fun, and it's all about adventure. And but it's funny with the technology we have at our fingertips today. A really good friend of mine was over the other night, and we were just playing around with some studio recording equipment in preparation for possibly some audio-based short stories coming soon. But I did have on file. He was a gentleman that I played basically live with, a bit of heavy metal for probably close to 20 years, I think, on and off. But we were sort of having a laugh because I played back a recording from some of our very original jams going back to probably 1994 that were recorded on a cassette player in the corner of a room.
Oh, no.
That I had managed to get this cassette not so long ago and then transfer it digital, to a digital file. The recording was... hey, the songs I think were fantastic, but the other recording was absolutely atrocious. And to now have all these tools at your disposal is an amazing thing. So that's my little gushing about technology out of the way. But yes, episode 58.
And I have to say that you have done an amazing job and been able to salvage what sometimes were difficult, technically difficult recordings as, people's internet wavers in and out or, various bits and pieces and pings and all of those kind of things. And hopefully we've come up with a sound. I'm going to say hopefully we. Did you see that, Royal we? Come up with a sound that people do enjoy. So... good on you, Darren, for learning all those things.
Oh, thank you. But yeah, of course, with fantastic technology comes, glitches that we all experience at one time or another.
Yes.
So that's those wonderful challenges as well. How do we work with them? So definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, timing and technology, even for the sci-fi panel that we had a bit of a chat with, meant that we had a slightly different looking panel, but fear not. Timing and technology, we will get another sci-fi panel happening to pick up those other bodies as well. So, yeah.
That's right. Always
lots
a learning
to look forward
curve.
to. But this is number 58.
And 58 represents 50. Well, that's 58 reasons for me to keep on going, keep on learning. And I can't wait to keep on rolling through and chatting with so many different authors.
Excellent. Now, I'm going to give you the bingo call for 58 before you tell us what its deeper meaning is. So, 58... make them wait.
Interesting. So I guess I expect doctors and dentists to have that. I can expect them to have, those big gold medallions like rap style 58. They know the meaning, but most of us don't. And then they see across the room at the shopping centre someone else with that 58 around their neck, and they just give a little knowing nod. Yeah, make them wait. No, I love dentists and I love doctors.
You love? Oh, yeah. Well. Yeah, I know her, and friends with lots of doctors. Dentists not so much, although I met some in my during my health career. I must say, as a young child, they were not my favourite health professional, let's just say, dentists and orthodontists, having been born with very protruding two front teeth, mostly because I would have, have them stuck on my lip while I was reading or writing. So, yeah, there you go. But anyway, stop that.
Well, I say I love them both, but what I really mean is they are the last people I want as an enemy.
Oh. So that's, keep your friends close and your enemies close.
Yes, something like that. Yeah, definitely.
All right.
I've seen
Tell
the
us
Marathon
about number
Man.
58. You've got something to tell us
Possibly.
about 58?
Well, every number is special in its own unique way,
Yes.
and 58 is very special also. But I was actually interested to read that there were several civilizations apparently native to Central America or South America that actually believed in the existence of 58 original sins.
Right.
And so that, therefore, the number 58 basically became a number that symbolised misfortune. And so it was curious because the myth goes that Aztec oracles, if they stumbled across that number in nature, and the example that I read was that one of the oracles found 54 shattered pieces of gold. 58 shattered pieces of gold. They believe that would, it basically says disaster is about to, come upon them. So interesting that, But at the same time, see, this is where you've got to really keep your open mind, because on one hand it spells disaster and misfortune. On the other hand, apparently number 58 is focusing on creating a solid and secure future using a playful approach to the process.
There you go.
There we go. So the number 58 apparently signifies business, focus, adventure, pragmatism, conscientiousness, and expressing personal freedom. It also signifies building a base for the future and the joy of experiencing new things. So the number 58, it is said, is very pragmatic and knows the right way to accomplish a goal. And people who resonate with this number, so that is us right now for this episode, often change their methods of doing things to achieve optimum results, which is very strange because we were actually having that conversation off air about changing things up to keep the show fresh and add new elements. So there we go.
Yeah.
Maybe my jesting or, subtle sarcasm about the science behind the numbers, maybe I have to sort of dial that back a little bit, because there we go. Either that or, if I see anything 58 in nature and then disaster happens, then I'm all in. But at the moment, I'll just pull back a little bit because, definitely, of course, we are an organic podcast and we're always looking to change things to try and make it, the best possible experience for all of our fantastic listeners out there. Mm-hmm. So that is 58. But as far as in the good old Australia in 1958.
Yes, tell us what was happening.
Well, did you know that on the 14th of January, Qantas Airways introduced a round-the-world air service from Australia to London.
Woohoo!
There we go. So the world was opening up. And now the Cahill Expressway in Sydney opened.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so which apparently was the first true freeway in Australia, which is pretty cool. This one is for your hometown, 15th of April. The Monash University is founded in Melbourne.
Ah, there you go. Yes.
And the 19th, well, here's something kind of related to Melbourne, but kind of on the other side of the country. It'll all make sense in a second. Now, on the 19th of July, the last tram service ran in Perth.
Ah.
So interesting. So they stopped their trams and obviously Melbourne kept them.
Melbourne kept going, yeah.
So
they are the
Adelaide.
lifeblood of our city and inner suburbs, for sure.
Yes.
Yep.
Now, a very important day, the 30th of September, the Anzac Day Act of 1958 received royal assent, which made Anzac Day a national public holiday in Australia.
There you go.
Yeah, so I was surprised to sort of learn about that. Now, as far as when it comes to music, Johnny O'Keefe had his first hit with Wild One. Radio station 2UE published the first Australian top 40. So there we go. That's I guess you could say the beginning of popular pop music, popular culture, rock music.
Yeah,
I don't know how you do
good
it,
contributor.
but
Yeah,
I think so. Because I was manipulated by the top 40 all through my younger years. If it was in the top 10, I had to go get the Cass single or the single record, or sit there with my pause record on the radio and hopefully record it without the damn DJ coming in or out at the beginning.
There you go.
Yes.
Back to the old cassette player.
Yes.
Press, record and start at the same time. Yep.
Record, play, and hit pause. And
yes,
then
and then you've got to unpause and hope you've unclicked it.
That's right.
The correct gap.
Yeah. But I was such a nerd. I used to put my little tape recorder against the TV and record movies so I could listen to them in the bedroom. But anyway, that's for another story. But as far as inventions, it was pretty profound. Now, I know we've spoken about this invention before on previous podcasts, but it was in 1958 that the Australian engineer Dr. David Warren of Melbourne's Aeronautical Research Laboratories constructed the world's first flight recorder, aka black box, which is actually orange, obviously, so that it can be found amongst the wreckage. But
that's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, the black box. So, very, very important. But doing a little bit of research on the flight recorder, it looks as though there were several attempts, not just here in Australia, to kind of perfect and have something as functional as the black box. But it was, Mr. David Warren of Melbourne who came across the finish line and has given the world such, an important piece of technology. And there we go, 1958 in Australia. Wow.
1958 in Australia. So good for anybody who wasn't born at that time, and also for any of our international listeners. There you have hopefully some information that you might get in a quiz.
That's right. Except I was put off by trivia games because going back again, I guess, to childhood, do you remember when Trivial Pursuit was such a...
Oh, yes. We've got several varieties of Trivial Pursuit, yes.
Yeah, so we got the normal, not the easy one, the normal one that's got quite hard, and I was all excited, and I kind of remember one of my first, landed on something, and it was a science one. I was all excited, and the question was, how many golf balls are there on the moon? I don't like this game anymore. How am I supposed to know how many golf balls are on the moon? This is not, common knowledge, or it's not even the knowledge I'd get on even in a bizarre conversation. Because how? So I knew moving forward beyond that.
So how many are there? Can you remember? Was that imprinted on your mind?
Well, I had the number 3 imprinted on my mind, but I think that I was incorrect, or it's changed. I don't know, because I think
if anybody does know, please feel free to write in and tell us how many golf balls are there on the moon.
Well, with the power of technology, I'll just go
and you'll Google that, and before you know it...
So the power of technology. There are 2 golf balls on the moon.
There you go.
So my memory imprint was a little bit fuzzy.
It's a little bit fuzzy, yeah.
There you go.
Okay.
So, easy with today's magic technology, but back then you get asked the most absurd questions. And it was, definitely a board game of frustration.
We did do some good fun quizzes over Zoom during the lockdowns in Melbourne, because my kids were in the city in 2 different spots, and of course we're up here in regional Australia, and we did do some general knowledge quizzes, and then some quizzes that were like particular to the person, like what is Fraser's favourite colour? Well, even Fraser wasn't sure about that, but we did do some good fun quizzes, and it's nice to stretch your brain in slightly different ways and use, different aspects of recall and memory and deduction and those kind of things. So, yeah, good fun quizzes.
Yes, and I have partaken in the occasional quiz night at local bars.
Yep.
So now they're always good fun. And like I said, makes you have to think about areas of knowledge that you probably have ignored for a long time.
Indeed,
so, yes.
Indeed. But speaking of knowledge, do we have some news? How about we have some news? Let's get into some news.
I like that idea.
All right, so a couple of general newsworthy items, and then I'm going to, share some of the meanings and idioms, some Australian idioms again, as we continue to educate our audience, or remind them sometimes. So the Text Prize 2022 shortlist was announced, which is fantastic. And so this is for young, adult and children's writing, and it's worth $10,000. So I'll let you know who the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on the short list. So, and look, it's interesting just to read the really brief description, just to see what is, I guess, making the cut for young adult and children's writing. So Bellamy Jones and the Lost Tree Heart by Emily Beck is a middle grade about 12-year-old Bellamy Jones who must participate in a global robotics tournament with her sister's hand-built robot in a quest to save her family's home. I like it.
I like that too, because, sorry to interrupt, Veronica, this is one of those moments of synchronicity.
Yeah.
Because when I have my little bit of downtime, as you know, I love playing a game where you got to run from killers.
Yeah.
And and sometimes I can't help but giggle if I see a friend in trouble and running while I'm safe and sound. And for some reason, the new thing is to laugh and go, "Run, Bellamy, run," because we remembered Bellamy from the goodies. And I hadn't heard that word or said that word in years, and then here you are, just a day or two later.
Again.
Bellamy, there we are.
Yes, there you go.
Synchronicity.
Yeah. How to Be Normal by Ange Crawford is a YA, a contemporary novel about friendships, tightly kept secrets, and a quirky main character figuring out who she is. Third one, One Thing You Can Feel by Robbie Taylor Hunt is a YA. It's a dark fantasy about the power of friendship and confronting your deepest fears. Nice, I like that. Year of the Dog by Kate McCabe is a middle grade about neurodivergent 11-year-old Lewis who is keen to prove to his parents that he can look after a dog on his own.
Oh wow!
Nice to have stories about neurodivergent kids in the mainstream. It's good.
And of course, we've had the fantastic,
the fabulous
Kate
Foster.
Kate, who's, if I remember correctly, the star of the show in that in her story is a little 11-year-old boy as well. Yeah, so there we go. Really more synchronicity at work.
Yeah. So the next one is Finding Liminus, The Sudden Tree by Bria McCarthy. That's a YA, a fantasy novel that reimagines Australian landscapes and explores finding courage. It's set in a world where giant weather monsters, called seasons, have caused destruction. So, yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
I love that we've got so many fantasies too, let's be honest. They're my favourite. Okay. The Collector of Gifts by Jamie Ramjan is a YA, which follows Willa, who finds nothing is as it seems in the Empire of Eden, where every child is placed in an orphanage to develop their unique mystical gift so that they can help save their world. Tricky. I do like the name Willa. That reminds me of the Lifetime of Impossible Days, which is by Tabitha Bird. That is a fantastic book. And also just a magical realism kind of fantasy portal one. Yeah, really nice. Anyway, The Collector of Gifts by Jamie Ramjan. The final shortlisted book is Let's Never Speak of This Again by Megan Williams. And it's a YA about 16-year-old best friends Abby and Ella, who discover a shift in their friendship when new girl Chloe comes into the picture. So there you go. So the winner, along with the recipient of the Steph Bow Mentorship, also chosen for the shortlist, will be announced in late June. So there you go.
And so
very good.
That was all YA?
YA and some middle grade. And some middle grade, yeah.
Okay, some middle grade, yeah.
Yeah, which is fantastic. So thank you to the Text Prize, which is really good. Little factual account, US audiobooks, and this is a pick up from Books and Publishing, which is certainly if you're into books, if you're authors and writers, etc., and even publishers, hopefully you are subscribed to this, but that they've mentioned that the US audiobook market recorded its 10th straight year of double-digit growth in 2021. So this is data from the Audio Publishers Association, showing that the market grew 25% compared to 2020. There you go. So this has been reported in Publishing Perspectives. So audiobook revenue in 2021 totaled US $1.6 billion, which is Australian $2.2 billion. So that's nearly 74,000 audiobook titles were published last year, up 6% on 2020. So, and I'm going to talk about me in a minute, but the APA executives of the Audio Publishers Association, Executive Director Michelle Cobb, told Publishing Perspectives that science fiction and fantasy narrowly edged out mysteries, thrillers, and suspense as the most popular genre. Well, of course, with me buying as many as I can, with romance and general fiction not far behind. The romance genre experienced the most growth, up 75%, followed by self-help, 34%, and science fiction, 32%. So as opposed to some details that we talked about on the science fiction panel, part 1, where there was a bit of a decline in some areas of science fiction, audiobooks, they are rocking it. And the sales survey includes data from 28 publishers, including Audible, Hachette, HarperCollins, Macmillan, Penguin, Random House, and Simon & Schuster. So not everybody, of course, but a big chunk of the market. So I thought that was certainly worth sharing.
Yeah, I think it's a topic that I'd love to explore, take a deep dive into on one of our upcoming podcasts as we move forward, because I think it is... You know, on one hand, it's so prolific out there. All these audiobooks, you've got Audible, and so many different services there to download audiobooks. And you're right. There's, I think it's one of the most beautiful aspects of audiobooks. One, obviously, the ease of technology. You can be listening to it in your car, and then you can transfer straight to your phone, and all those things. So that's all fantastic. But ultimately, it's also, from what I've found just in my general experience with people, audiobooks, that they're reading books that they wouldn't normally have time to read.
Yes,
and so
this is true.
They're rediscovering the love of reading, albeit in a slightly different way, someone reading it to them. But still, nonetheless, the story still comes through, and the themes still come through, and the same food for thought will arrive. But so I think it's fantastic that it's letting people that maybe don't normally have the time to read, who really want to read, and maybe are rediscovering the joy of reading through audiobooks.
But give them access to stories in those other worlds,
But at the same time, as an author, if you wake up tomorrow or today, depending if you slept in, because you were burning the midnight candle all night, midnight candle. But if you wake up and decide, I want to do an audiobook, it's where do you start?
Yes.
Just what.
And it's certainly doable, and there's certainly different models of hybrid models, and traditional publishers have their, particular processes and companies and voice actors that they use. And look, the voice is incredibly important. So I am a recent convert to audiobooks, probably the last 12 months or so. Some of that being that, long walks on my own during lockdown, when you can go out and have your exercise. And what I've found is that the voice is incredibly important. Even if I think I would love to read the book, if the voice doesn't hit my ears right, then I just can't listen. I have to move along and find another one. And it's really interesting because, I use the little, earbuds so that not the rest of the neighbourhood needs to hear the story. And I've found that I am really tuned into hearing Australian voices, that almost regardless of what they're narrating, whether it's the Phryne Fisher murders or whether it's Tracy Harding's fantasy series, whatever that might be, if it's an Australian voice, it feels very comfortable and it's fine. When I've had some British voices, I've been listening to The Rivers of London. His voice, again, really lovely, works well. There are some of the American voices which, again, brilliant. I'm listening to Vicious by V.E. Schwab at the moment. Absolutely fine. But then there are the occasional voices that I go, no, I just can't listen to this, even if the book is really good. It's almost as though it just kind of pings, I don't know, against a really sensitive eardrum or something, or maybe my brain just doesn't like the sound of it. So, yeah. But I listen to my audiobooks through the library, because if I was to take out another book subscription, I think I might, be having to give up the house. But so our local library uses about 3 different audiobook platforms, and I think BorrowBox and Libby are the ones that I tend to use. And you can borrow the books for a week, and then it takes a little bit longer usually for me to read them, depending on how often I walk. But it's easy then. You can read them, listen to them, you can review them, you can send them back if you like them, you can get them out again. You still have to reserve them if they're pretty popular. And, unfortunately, some of the more popular books don't always have their audiobooks out at the same time. So, sometimes you have to wait. But that's my audiobook experience.
So it's interesting because
to audiobooks?
I do. I've usually downloaded them. And I understand what you mean about the voice being important. Obviously, the voice is going to be important. Everybody has a different ear for different voices. And I think that, it's just one of those new elements of literature that is, it's not a symptom, but an accessory to today's technology. Because, I guess that one thing that comes up is you want a voice that is not going to get in the way of the story. So it's kind of got to be invisible.
Yeah. But also, I'd say one that's able to get into the story. So Cobner, who reads Ben Aronovich's Rivers of London, he does all the voices and he does all the accents because, as you know, in very small, the United Kingdom, British Isles, etc., Scotland, Ireland, there are so many different accents that, 20k up the road are completely different, and he does them all so beautifully. And yet I've read others listen to others who are a little bit more just the story. So I would say to be able to get into the character is lovely, because sometimes it's hard to know who's saying what when you're just listening to it, as opposed to if you see italics, it's an internal thought, that kind of thing. But look, I will say also that my mum was always much better at reading stories than my dad. He got better as he got older, but we would always say, "Can you read it, Mum? Because Dad's really boring." But yeah, and maybe that's where I got my love of listening for stories. So yeah, there you go.
And I'm just curious because I've never borrowed a audiobook from the library. Is it a download? In which case, is it got a time limit on it? Or are you
it does have a time limit, yes.
Right,
so it's a download. You can listen to it from their website, or you can download it, and it downloads sort of chapter by chapter, and then you can do that all at once so that you're kind of ready to go. And then they send you messages, you better renew, or we're going to delete it off all your devices, etc. And so just you send it back.
That's really interesting. I mean, it's a digital file, so I would have thought it would be a simple case of the file will know when it's reached its end marker, and then it will just disintegrate, like the old secret
so
message.
You can renew if you don't quite finish the story. You can renew it. I think you can renew it, like most library things, 1 or 2 times to make sure you get it. But there you go. All right, so that was my news, which is interesting. I wanted now to, just before we do, jump into your news, we are up to Q with the meanings and origins of Australian words and idioms. Many thanks to the Australian National University School of Literature, Languages and Linguistics. So here's one that will be a favourite of yours, and I don't think it's going to be a stretch for you to tell me.
Okay.
Do you know what a quokka is?
Oh, yes, I know what a quokka is. Never had the opportunity to have fun and party with one in real life, but I have seen them.
They are cheeky little blighters, let me tell you. I've seen them over on Rottnest Island, yes. So for those who don't know and who haven't seen our little emblem, our little mascot for comedy, the comedy genre on Australian Book Lovers, a quokka is a small, short-tailed wallaby. Its Latin name is Cetanix brachyurus of southwestern Western Australia, including Rottnest and Bald Islands. And these islands are free of quokka predators such as foxes and cats, which means they can, breed quite comfortably. And the quokka was first recorded by Europeans in 1855, and it comes from the Noongar, the Aboriginal language of this area. So quokkas are about the size of a cat. They have long greyish brown fur and rounded ears, and they look quite cute, but of course they're not. They are wild animals, so please don't try and feed them. It's not a good thing.
However, they're very famous, I understand, for being the absolute superstars of photos, aren't they?
Oh, they love a photo, yes.
Yeah,
they love a photo. Yeah, absolutely gorgeous. And I've got another Q word, which is it's quoll.
Oh, okay. Quoll.
So
yeah, that's now most listeners out there won't know what I'm talking about when I say that that's actually a bad word at the moment. And that is based on a short stinted government contracting job I did.
Right.
That's all
right. We'll just leave that one slide, shall we?
No. But I think quoll, when I hear quoll, it's an acronym for something that I suspect is very different to what you're going to say.
What I'm going to say, indeed, because I'm going to say quoll is any of several marsupials of the genus Dasyurus of Australia and New Guinea. So quolls are cat-sized as well, marsupials with long tails, pointed snouts, brown fur and distinctive white spots. I do like a quoll. They are nocturnal and they hunt insects, birds and small mammals. And the word quoll derives from the Gugu Yimithir, an Aboriginal, and apologies for the incorrect pronunciation. That is an Aboriginal language of northeastern Queensland. Joseph Banks, the botanist who came out with James Cook's Voyage of Discovery, European discovery in 1768 to 1771, recorded it in his Endeavour journal. And that was when the Endeavour was beached for repairs on the site of the present-day Cooktown. However, quoll was not the name that the European settlers used. They used native cat until the end of the mid-19th century. So from the 1960s, the word quoll replaced native cat, and today quoll is the dominant term, using the local traditional owners' language, which is excellent.
Oh, there you go.
So that's probably enough for me. That's Q. So do you have some new books for us this week?
Well, actually, I thought today, being that our special guest for the interview, Mr. Andrew Roff, who we'll be chatting about very shortly, considering his latest release, The Teeth of a Slow Machine, which we'll be talking a lot about, is an anthology of short stories, 17 to be precise. I actually thought in this new segment I would run through just a few short story competitions that are closing soon across Australia, that anybody with a pen, pencil, dictator, keyboard,
get ready.
Can jump on in and have a shot. So the first one I'd like to let our listeners know about is from the Society of Women Writers New South Wales, and it's the Society of Women Writers New South Wales National Writing Competition for 2022. Now it is open to all women writers who are Australian citizens or permanent residents aged 18 years or over. And now it is available to members and non-members. The closing date for this national writing competition is 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on the 30th of June. So you've still got a few weeks there to pen a little masterpiece. So it is for basically, so the prizes awarded are going to be for short story, for fiction, with the winner receiving $500, highly commended $250 and commended $100. Short story non-fiction, same thing again, $500, $250 and $100. Poetry, there's actually a $300 prize tag for the winner, $200 for the highly commended and $100 for the commended. And winning entries will also be considered for inclusion in the Society's centenary anthology to be published in 2025.
Excellent.
So, pretty cool. Now, there is a fee per entry for this one. So short story, fiction and non-fiction, there is a fee of $40 for non-members and $30 for members. And for poetry submissions, it is $15 per poem or $40 for 3 for members, or $20 per poem for non-members. Now, to learn more, simply visit Women Writers New South or NSW, so it's short for New South Wales.org, and follow the links. So that was the Women Writers of New South Wales National Writing, or should I say National Writing Competition, ending on the 30th of June.
There you go. End of the financial year. Good time to end.
Yes. Now, here's one a little bit up, well, I would say up your alley, but shall we say local to your region, kind of. I know you're a little bit outside of Melbourne, but the City of Melbourne's Lord Mayor's Creative Writing Awards of 2022 is currently open. Mm-hmm. Now, this one, it's kind of shutting the door to a lot of Australia because it is open to writers living in Victoria only. Mm-hmm. However, we've got some fantastic listeners and so many fantastic
and
writers
many
in
of our
Victoria,
listeners are in Victoria.
Yes, that's right. And so basically it's the Dorothy Porter Award for Poetry. There is a narrative non-fiction, short story set in Melbourne, life writing award for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander writers, and self-told stories by writers living with a disability. Now it is basically so for the poetry is up to 100 lines. Mm-hmm. The narrative non-fiction, no more than 5,000 words, so we are talking short stories. The short story set in Melbourne, again, no more than 5,000 words. Life Writing Award for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander writers, no more than 5,000 words. And likewise for the self-told stories by writers living with a disability, no more than 5,000 words. I cannot make a submission, but if I did, my short story set in Melbourne would be Melbourne. Today it is cold. The end.
That's a bit cruel. It might be true, but it's a bit cruel.
P.S. written in summer 2020. No, I'm not joking. But so a fantastic opportunity for authors in Victoria, and that is the City of Melbourne's Lord Mayor's Creative Writing Awards 2022. Now, winning entries will receive a $2,000 category prize, which is pretty awesome. And the overall winner, this one's really good, the overall winner of the Lord Mayor's Creative Writing Award will win an additional $10,000. So if that's not a bit of a fuel in the tank to get the pen catching fire across the page, I don't know what it is. The closing date, like the other one, is the 30th of June. I'm going to put the link for all of these short story competition in our show notes because some of them are easy and some of them are a bit long. Yeah. But I won't read you out the whole one, but if you did want to sort of jump on now while you're listening, you could probably find your way by going to www.melbourne.vic.gov.au /community/libraries/what's on, and then what's on with a dash in between. I'm sure you'll be able to get to there, but otherwise I'll be putting the entire link in our show notes. Now here's another one from the Australian Catholic University Poetry Prize. So a little bit, not quite short story, but more for all those poets out there. Now this is open to anyone enrolled at any Australian university across Australia. Obviously, Australian University. Yes, you can see I am on fire today.
You are.
Poems cannot exceed, or must not, shall we say, not exceed 60 lines. There is an entry fee of $25 per poem. Now, this one, I sort of did sort of open my eyes a little bit for a second because, Australian Catholic University Poetry Prize, okay, it's not something I would think would be, the prize would be too big, it's just a poetry prize. First prize is $10,000.
Wow.
Second prize is $5,000 and third prize is $3,000. So I think that is amazing.
That's pretty significant. I think you'd have to give that a damn good go.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I'm going to hazard a guess that the theme is hope. But you can learn more by going to ACU, so obviously Australian Catholic University, acu.edu.au, and look for that Australian Catholic University Poetry Prize. Entries close 4th of July, so there's plenty of time. Opportunity.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if I mentioned already, there is an entry fee of $25 per poem, but with, what's that, $18,000 at a minimum of prize money up for grabs. That is, pretty alluring poetry competition there.
That's good. It's nice to see some, I won't say some funding, but some opportunities for, support come in for the arts. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, 100%. And once again, that's open to anyone enrolled at any Australian university. Now, to keep the short story competitions coming, there is the 2022 Rochelle Prize for Emerging Writers. Entries are open to unpublished writers of adult fiction and adult narrative non-fiction. And the prize, well, here we go. It seems to be a lucky number. Winning entry is $10,000 at a 12-month...
Maybe it doesn't go so far these days. We have to think about that because, $10,000 to me still sounds like a lot of money. But when you think about if the writer is using it to support themselves so that they can do more creation, then it's probably only a few months' worth, isn't it, by the time they pay their bills and feed themselves and...
Yeah, I mean, $10,000, that's a good desk, and depending on which company you go with, a few really cool helicopter rides. I think that's...
I don't think that's... But anyway, there might be some criteria. Sorry, go on. Tell us more about this particular festival.
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned, the winning entry is $10,000, but it also a 12-month mentorship with Hachette Australia. So
great.
So that's very cool. I always feel funny when you say writers of adult fiction, because if I said... director of adult movies, what would come to mind?
We don't want any of your movies, Darren. Yeah, moving on.
A writer of adult fiction. So the first 3 chapters of the work with a maximum word length of 20,000 words. This is, I'm assuming, the submission criteria, a 1-page synopsis, a chapter breakdown of the rest of the work, no more than 2 A4 pages long. Closing date is the 8th of July 2022, of course. And you can learn more by going to or visiting emergingwritersfestival.org.au. And that was the 2022 Rochelle Prize for Emerging Writers.
Very good.
But the list doesn't end there. So, I mean, it is winter. It's no better time than to get your pen down, as in get your pen to work, should I say, and get these short stories and submit them. You never know what's going to happen. So,
or go to a festival, because there are a stack of festivals on.
Yeah, I think maybe we'll have to spotlight that on our next news.
Yes.
Maybe that's both of our homework to do.
Yeah, I've got it right here in front of me because I forgot that I was going to mention it. But you're telling us all about short stories, so let's just do that, because then I want to get on to listening to your interview with Andrew Roff.
Yes. Well, I've got 2 more short stories to let everyone know about.
Yep.
One is the Burundara Literary Awards, and that is an open short story competition for short stories word length between 1,500 and 3,000 words. First place receives $1,500, second place $1,000, third place $500. There's also a Keith Carroll Award of $500 given to the best entry from the Burundara resident. Now, it doesn't say there that there's any sort of admission fee. Closing date of 29th of July. Now, again, that's a little bit of a tricky web link, but I will have that there. See, it's just 1 click on your mouse from our show notes.
Yes.
And the last what should I say, the awesomely lucky last short story competition that I'd like to highlight is the 2022 Sydney Hammond Memorial Short Story Competition. So first prize is $250 plus Hawkeye Publishing gift voucher, plus anthology cover based on the winner's story. Shortlisted and longlisted are announced, plus top 40 published in an anthology. The maximum is 1,000 words for the short story competition. The theme, Water Under the Bridge, is a $15 entry, and closing date is the 1st of August. So that gives you quite a bit of time to consider Water Under the Bridge and what that might mean. To learn more, you can visit hawkeyebooks.com.au, where you'll find all the information for that one.
Very good.
So I honestly think, winter, when it's cold, it gets dark early, and, if you wanted to write a short story, if you have written short stories, there's so many, amazing opportunities out there. Of course, there can only be one winner, but just the process of maybe, putting your back to the wall and saying, right, I've got 3 weeks to come up with maybe 1, 2, 3 short stories and send off the best or send them off all. You've got a whole range of different competitions out there, and you just never know.
You do just never know. It might be what you've been looking for. So if you've been a reader up till now and you think, you know what, perhaps I could have a go by just at least starting with a short story. You had an idea rattling around in your head. Give it a shot. Get out there.
Yeah, I mean, so, for example, one I might be submitting would be a short story. I can't send that Melbourne one, but for Adelaide, it would be I Arrived in Adelaide. It Was Awesome by Darren. It doesn't have to be long.
I think you're talking about microfiction now, so let's just move on. Now, I did mention the literary festival, so I should just say that there is a fabulous website that's put together. It's been put together for a number of years now by writer Jason Narang, Vampires in the Sunburnt Country, and he puts up the Australian Literary Festival calendar. So he gathers all of the bits and pieces, he puts them in months, the links are all there, and it's incredibly useful. So you can find, like June, there's just an absolute swamp of festivals to go to in June all over the country. Denmark and WA, Words on the Wave, Central Coast, New South, Bellingen, Port Fairy, Woodend, Comic-Con in Melbourne. There's trade conferences in Sydney, Winter Words in Beechworth. Oh, that's lovely. Maybe I'll go to that one. Emerging Writers Festival, which you mentioned. Supernova. There's the Williamstown Literary Festival. There's just the Disrupted Festival Ideas in Perth. That's later in June. The Glen Ira Storytelling Festival, the Outback Writers Festival in Queensland, the Northern Territory Writers Festival, which has been rescheduled a couple of times because of COVID. So please go along to that if you are anywhere near the Northern Territory, Darwin, at the end of June. The Kids YA Festival in Sydney, and Supernova is over in Perth this year as well. So there you go. So we'll put that link on the show notes so that you can actually have a look at Jason's calendar and pick up all the details there.
Fantastic. So, yes, we've got a fantastic guest today, as you mentioned, or that we were going to chat about, Mr. Andrew Roff, who, by chance, happens to also be a fantastic Adelaide author,
yes.
or Adelaide-based author. But he is celebrating the debut release of his short story anthology, The Teeth of a Slow Machine. And it was,
I love that title.
Absolutely, yeah. It really invokes something, it's one of those words or terms that can invoke a kind of like, it's a weird feeling, like is it a menacing, is it quiet, is it is it a slow machine of time, or is it a slow machine of destruction? So it's such an ambiguous term. So a fantastic title for the book, which wasn't the original title, which is something you'll discover in the wonderful chat that I had the opportunity to chat with Andrew. So I think we cover so much about short stories and the elements to his writing, and it was just a really great chance to delve into a little bit of his craft and the motivations behind his craft. Having had the pleasure of reading some of the book already, it is, well, I won't give away anything too much because I do talk about it in the interview. So let's jump straight into the interview. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Andrew Roff. Ladies and gentlemen, my next spectacular guest that I've got the absolute privilege of having a chat with has worked, or is working as a lawyer, has worked as a computer programmer, an aircraft salesman, and a mystery shopper. When not writing, he says he cooks, argues, laughs, and administers a small human, of course, as well as listening to some music. Now, this gentleman's short fiction has appeared in publications such as Mean Gin, Overland, Griffith Review, and Going Down Swinging, which is just a few names among many. He was the winner of the 2020 Peter Carey Short Story Award and the 2018 Margaret River Press Short Story Competition, as well as having been shortlisted and commended in many other short story prizes. Back in 2016, his very first novel was shortlisted for the Wakefield Press Unpublished Manuscript Award at Adelaide's Writers' Week, and as of March 2022, his very brand new debut short story collection called The Teeth of a Slow Machine has been officially released, also through Wakefield Press, and has been described as a daring, irreverent exploration of the conundrums of contemporary life and what it means to be a human. Andrew Roff, thank you so much for joining us for the Australian Book Lovers podcast.
My pleasure, Darren. Yeah, thanks for having me, and it's great to catch up again. And what an intro! I couldn't have put it better myself. So that was.
Well, I'm wondering how much. Yeah, possibly some of that you did put to yourself, and maybe.
possibly, yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah. Don't want to tell everyone how the sausage gets made, but.
No, that's right. Yes, or as Veronica had pointed out, the snag, which was
that's right,
on one of our episodes. But I'm just curious, how does one go from aircraft sales, which I'm kind of trying to work out what that is anyway, to computer programmer, and then to the legal profession? How is that? It doesn't sound like a typical sort of pathway to a courtroom.
Yeah, perhaps I just have a short attention span. I don't know, but no, I studied computer programming and law at university, and did one and then the other basically, and the law has taken me to basically a business where we invest in a few different other companies. One of which was a flight training school in Melbourne that also sold aircraft. And briefly, one of my hats that I was wearing was aircraft salesman. So that was a short but pretty scary gig for a little while for someone who didn't know a great deal about aircraft. But I got up to speed pretty quickly and relied on the pilots at the school to tell me what was going on. So yeah, something a bit different.
One of my goals in life at some point is to not only learn how to fly a helicopter, but obviously to purchase one. And I have had a bit of a look at the prices, and they're a little bit out of my league at the moment. But at least if that moment comes to fruition, and I do find myself shopping for a helicopter, which will probably come before any lessons, because at least then I'll have it, I can sit in it. The learning part, that can come later. But maybe I'll have a chat to you, and so you can make sure I'm not going to lose my pants and shirt in the transaction.
Absolutely. Maybe you can do a timeshare or something with 100 other people, or something. We'll work something out. So.
Oh, that's an interesting idea. But then, yes, we'll definitely have to vet the pilots extremely well, because the irony is I have a bit of a fear of flying, so we'll work that one out. Now, before we get into all the seriousness and all the fun and all the excitement that is literature, I was just wondering if your current life was turned into a character on Law and Order, as far as in your legal profession, would you prefer to see yourself as a lawyer for the defence or the prosecution?
Great question. I think I'd probably join the defence team, because I do like playing the devil's advocate, and I think part of the fun of being a lawyer is examining things from all sorts of different angles. Usually, if someone's being prosecuted, there's a fair whack of evidence that's sort of built up in the case against them. So you've got to think pretty laterally if you're a defence counsel. I think I've never practiced in criminal law, but I think I'd be on the defence team, and obviously, in all seriousness, I think defence lawyers do a really important job, and can only work with the facts, and they do a lot of, as I understand it, a lot of guilty pleas and helping clients understand their options that may not be taking it all the way to the High Court and fighting things, but coming to the realisation that they've done something that isn't right, but making sure that they're represented when the sentencing rolls around. So I think I think I'd be on team defence.
I agree with you. I think I would too, and I have zero experience with anything to do with criminal law or anything like that. But I do, my observation from a distance standpoint is that the importance of lawyers in general, but especially defence lawyers, is akin to someone finding themselves on another planet with different languages, and you suddenly have a best friend that's going to help navigate the waters with you and try and make sure you can get back home okay. Because I would, for most of us, the inside a courtroom is as foreign as an empty beach on Mars, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, look, absolutely. It's another world, and the very few times that I've appeared in court in a professional capacity, it's it's as a lawyer who understands 80% of what's going on, it's scary. But as a defendant who's never been in court before, it must be terrifying. So I think it's a really important job.
Yes, I agree. And yes, if I was on Law and Order, I'd like to be a defence lawyer. I'd also like to hang out with Ice-T a bit, because I think it's just absolutely crazy that a rap and singer, songwriter who wrote, was it Cop Killer, ended up being a beacon of morality. But he is a great guy and fun show. But nonetheless, legal stuff aside, well, actually, no, not legal stuff aside yet, but you mentioned a little bit about, the objectivity that's required in law. And I know that recently I had the pleasure of speaking with Tanya Heaslip, who is also a lawyer. And, as part of the conversation, Tanya mentioned that some of the challenges she discovered when it came to switching from, mention the challenge, should I say, that she discovered when it came to taking a legal hat off when it came to writing legal documents, and then shifting to, fiction, so which by its nature in general is subjective. Now, obviously, we don't want to go in because it's your private matter of what exactly you do with regards to the legal profession. But I'm wondering, is between programming and the legal system or the law world that you find yourself in, have you found a similar challenge when it comes to moving into your short writing and being able to, or that need to be able to change hats at the turn of a dime? Or has writing always been a part of your life and it's been no issue?
Yeah, look, I really enjoy writing, I think, largely because it does seem to exercise a different part of my brain to what I'd call professional or technical writing. And on the professional technical writing side, most of my day-to-day is drafting contracts, which seems to me a lot like computer programming. It's basically using rules to try and engineer an outcome. And your goal in doing that is really to eliminate any sense of ambiguity or anything unclear. But in my creative writing, I really revel in introducing ambiguity, leaving space for the reader to interpret and decide what they think is going on. And I love those ambiguous spaces in and around short stories. So I think the legal writing side of my brain informs the creative writing side, but it feels like a completely different process to me.
And it's interesting that you mentioned, that contracts seem a little bit like programming. Not that I have any of programming experience today, but back, when I was a kid growing up with the VIC-20 and Commodore 64 and Commodore 128, I think even the TRS-80, I was right into programming back then, which I think was BASIC, was the language.
I think you're showing your age a bit, Darren, but...
Well, I was little, very little. But writing Choose Your Own Adventures and stuff. But the funny thing was, I was at a friend's house not long ago. He builds his own little cinema, and he collects all antique and restores records and players and all that sort of jazz. And he had a pile of the Commodore 64 magazine. So sitting there having a flick through, and I was like reminiscing those days where they'd have a feature of a particular program that you would spend all weekend and every day after school copying, and then you run and you get your syntax errors, etc. But looking through some of the old coding, you're right, it really does, it's if this then, and if this, and if the value exceeds this, go here. If it's less than, go here, and those sorts of things. And it is a little bit like a contract, isn't it? I guess in a roundabout way, because, like I said, it's a pathway with no ambiguity. Yeah,
and I think I've tried to play with some of that structure in some of the short stories that I write, because sometimes it's interesting to really lead a reader down a very narrowly defined path, let them feel a bit claustrophobic, like they don't have any, the main character doesn't have any agency and they're being led along this really narrow path. And you can get that effect by, structuring a story as a piece of code, or, there's a story in the collection that's written in the form of a text-based, choose your own adventure style of game. And thinking about options, narrowing of options, I love exploring all that sort of stuff in my writing.
Which I think you do well, and but I like that sort of analogy you were hinting at there, in the sense of almost like taking an open mind and placing it within a closed environment, where choices are limited as far as movement forward, but the delving into the experience of that limited sort of range becomes open-ended, which so claustrophobic on one hand, and yet can be darkly illuminating on the other. But before we dive into a lot of the intricacies of your writing and inspirations and motivations, I'm just curious, short stories have obviously played a big part of your life for quite a while. You've won a lot of awards, you're always being published in different sort of publications and constantly producing, and your body of work is obviously growing by the day. When it comes to, I guess, the the proverbial pen to paper process of sitting down and writing. Is it something that is there a particular discipline you've developed over time, or is it still a case of striking when the iron's hot and in any way you can get it down? And as somebody who has obviously very proficient in computers and software and programming, is there a particular software that you use for your short story creations?
Yeah, so I'm not a hugely disciplined writer, I wouldn't say. And when inspiration strikes, the most useful thing I find is the Notes app on my phone.
Oh, really?
Just got to get the basic idea down in that Notes app, so that it's it almost feels like recording a dream or something. If I don't actually write it down, it'll just disappear. So most of my stories start with a concept or an idea. They're not built around a character usually.
Mm-hmm.
So they're pretty concept driven. So I get the concept, and then the next available opportunity to get some clear air to sit down and write, I just try and write the messiest, scrappiest first outline draft that I can get on paper. And I usually find that to be a really exciting, probably the most exciting stage of writing a short story. And a lot of the stories in the collection were actually written, first and second drafts on aeroplanes, actually.
Oh, okay.
There was a period where I was flying to and from Melbourne from Adelaide, once or twice a week. And you spend a lot of time in airports, a lot of time up in the air with nothing much to do. And if you've got a laptop, you can just tap away. And there's something about being in the air that it's like being at a library or a coffee shop or something. It's just seems to be conducive. So that actually helped me a lot. And then the real kind of work begins of taking this rough outline that you've sort of banged together and working out how is this actually going to work as a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. What is sustaining the tension through the story? Who are the characters? What's the setting? Where should I start the story? Where should I end the story? How am I going to get a satisfying resolution? What emotions and mood do I want to evoke as we go along? What style do I want to write it in? And just refining. And that process can take, 6 months from the first draft. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's my process. But I think to answer your original question, no, I'm not. I don't have a sort of regimented system or a routine really. I kind of play it a bit more loosely than that.
Yeah, and I think I'd probably fall in that camp as well. I think, if I were to try and discipline myself, when I say discipline in the sense of having a very regimented and structured, repetitive time slot, and do not sway from that, it would. Sometimes it just doesn't work. So same as for when you want to do a workout or something. Some days you're just not feeling it, and you're just going to do more damage. And if you just change your routine around, sometimes you have the best workouts of your life. But yes, but isn't it funny? You mentioned how you jot it down, possibly on your phone first, or at least get it down, the idea, because it's a bit like a dream, and even the best of dreams can sometimes slip away through our fingers. We're trying to remember them. But I've always found it really odd, and it's a question I ask a lot of people, and that is, at least my experience is, if I have an idea, just the process of writing down the basics, I'd never have to pick up that piece of paper again. It's almost as if a part of my brain has marked that idea as important, and not to let the whatever chemicals in the neuron pathways eat it away again and let it be overwritten. Do you think that's the same for yourself? Like if you pop an idea down on the phone, do you find that that's now embedded in your mind because of that process, or do you find yourself revisiting your notes?
Oh, look, absolutely. There is some alchemy that happens when you jot those notes down, and I think you're right. Often you don't actually have to refer to the written notes again. There's some transfer that's happened in your brain that it's gone from I don't know, short-term memory to long-term memory or something, or you've sat with the idea for long enough that you've got a sort of mental structure around where you want to go. But, you know, I'm sort of working on a story in the background at the moment, and that came from 4 words in the notes app of my phone. If anyone else read those 4 words, they wouldn't be able to make any sense of them. They were basically an image of how I wanted the final scene to sort of play out. But it's a, you know, from that, you know, I'm up to 5,000 words already, and it'll probably be an unpublishable 10,000 word story. So, you know.
You just had me intrigued about what the 4 words could possibly be. I hope it wasn't something like, you know, he's dead, pay now.
No, it was I can't remember exactly what the 4. I could go back and look at my phone, but it's sort of it's along the lines of, you know, matchbox, car, dust, hut, or something like that, and that even now, you know, I can conjure up the scene in my mind.
There we go. More of a symbolic arrow pointing to a memory as opposed to something that's spelling out the memory.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so now, having read one of your recent blogs, talking about the process of writing and being a writer and you know, all the work that you do. Now, in one of your recent blogs, you did chat a little bit about how, you know, you felt like maybe your writing identity was a bit of a secret, not in the sense of you want to keep it a secret, but you felt as though that, you know, it was a bit of a secret. I guess I can't put, you know, the words in your mouth, but you mentioned it was a bit of a secret in the sense that you weren't so sure about calling yourself a writer, but hinted that you might try, you know, moving forward to describe yourself a little bit more as a writer. I'm just curious, now that The Teeth of a Slow Machine has now been released and the book is out there and people are loving it, are you finding it a bit easier to say I am a writer?
Yeah, I think the cat's out of the bag now, and
no more secrets, Andrew.
That's it. I think you know, what I was perhaps struggling with was, you know, I had my writing identity, I guess you'd say, which was around writing short stories, submitting them to Australian literary journals, talking with other writers, largely online, also at the local writers' centre, and that part of my life was sort of quite starkly segmented away from family, friends, you know, my day job, and those 2 worlds sort of never collided.
Okay.
So the dilemma for me was, well, you know, how do I start to talk about my writing to my, you know, my friends who've never read any of my work, my family, but the beautiful thing about launching a book is you have a launch party and all your family and friends come, and then it ceases to be a problem anymore because they've all bought a copy of your book and they're starting to read it, and there's no going back after that. So, but I found it to be a really lovely experience to have all these people who've not read any of my writing, the people that I love, start to see what I've been doing, you know, locked in away in a room for the last 5 years, and they've all been great. They've, you know, been really supportive. So it's been great.
Yeah, well, what a beautiful thing. You know, obviously writing is a huge part of your life, and I suspect has been pretty much all your life, hasn't it, by the sounds of it? And yeah, it is something that can, not by choice or maybe even unconsciously, it can sort of slip into those shadows' secret world, doesn't it? You know, I'm speaking for myself, I've got lots of friends that, you know, aren't really interested in books or writing or stuff like that. You know, and so it's not even a point of conversation. But that's not to say that it's, you know, it's that secret love that I have that is just a consistent. For me, jobs come and go. The writing's will always be there, regardless of whether I make a penny or not. But it must have been, you know, it must have felt great to, like you said, have that book launch and just sort of tell the world that you are, you know, this is a big part of, you know, essentially it was a celebration of that was an important part of your life and will be. And now, in a way, it becomes an important part of other people's lives.
Yeah, well, you know, I think it's just been a great opportunity to include, you know, people in my life in the journey, and to celebrate with them, and like you know, I've got lots of friends who are not readers, not writers, and all you can do is put it in front of them, and they might pick it up and read it, or they might not, and either way is fine. So but at least they feel like they're included, and if they get behind it and support it, then that's great. And if it's not for them, then that's fine as well.
Yeah, and you've obviously published a lot of short stories prior to the release of The Teeth of the Slow Machine, but I'm just curious, is in regards to something like a book launch and really involving all your friends and family in such a wonderful celebration, was there also a little bit of fear, or not hesitation, but a little bit of oh no, here we go, in the sense of you're revealing really openly aspects of your internal musings to potentially an audience that may not have normally, because obviously people who love short stories and love your type of stories, that audience to a certain degree. But what about for friends and family that may not have come across literature such as yours before? Was there ever a concern that, they're going to be right inside my mind after they get a copy of the book?
Yeah, absolutely. And my mum, for example, is a big fan, but she's also prone to a bit of over-analysing. So she's quite happy to kind of corner me at a family lunch and say, now with this story, what was this about that time when this happened?
No.
So I've had to sort of navigate that, but no, she's been all right.
Although saying that, has she possibly illuminated any possible forgotten memories or incidents that may have been a trigger for a story?
Well, I think you mentioned fear, and I guess the biggest anxiety or fear you have in releasing a book is I can control the stuff that I write about that I know, where I know that I'm exposing a part of myself to the reader. But every time you write a story, you probably also expose a part of yourself to the reader that you didn't even that you never meant to, or that you don't even know that you're coming through on the page. So I think before the launch, that was probably my fear of what if this goes out and everyone points out something in the text and says, oh, that's what that's about, and I go, oh yeah, it is, I didn't know that I was writing about that, but that's clearly about that time that X, Y, and Z happened, so I didn't want to unintentionally reveal too much, but so far I haven't had any really dicey conversations along the line.
Well, I think there's a natural fear there for that with any art when you put yourself out there. But I think if anybody does bring up something and offer you suggestions as, maybe this triggered, or maybe if on the very good side of things, that at least they've been paying attention, they've absorbed your work, and so it's a beautiful thing. It's
a journey of self-discovery, I guess.
Yes, that's right. Yes, or discovery for everybody involved.
Yeah.
But now, so I understand it was last year, give or take, that Wakefield Press picked it up or began the process. And I was reading that Joe Case, who was an associate publisher at Wakefield Press, so Joe actually compared your collection to Matthew Baker's Why Visit America? In the reason being in the way its stories play with ideas through fully realised characters and worlds, with an often sardonic voice that is also intensely affecting. So, to quote Joe, the experimentation in these stories never feels forced, but instead masterfully complements the mood or theme of the story. That's a deceptively tough balance to strike. That's a word I haven't come across too often, sardonic, but I understand that at times it's used to describe, in essence, the art of revealing, possibly uncomfortable truths. So I was just wondering if revealing uncomfortable truths, or perhaps hinting at uncomfortable truths, is a theme that you maybe have some sort of intent to bring to your work.
I think the way I probably approach stories is that I don't want to make life too easy for my readers. This probably sounds terrible, but I do want my readers to do a little bit of work, and I do want my readers to be a little bit uncomfortable with the action that's going on in the story. And that might, there's lots of ways you can achieve that. But for example, you might have a viewpoint character who's kind of moral code is a little bit suspect, and they make decisions or they rationalize things in a way that readers might think, oh, gee, that's a bit it's a bit weird. I'm not sure that I would do the same thing if I was in that position. But I guess the balance that you have to strike there is that you don't want your characters to be so unrealistic or unlikable that the readers have no empathy for them. I try and give my characters enough dignity and enough realism that the readers are still barracking for them, even as they make some questionable life choices. That's my aspiration.
I've read. I'm about halfway through the book, so I think as far as that goal that you just described with the characters, I think you achieve it very well. But to sort of drill down a little bit into, I guess, your style of writing, the overall feel that I've sensed, and not necessarily the themes, but yeah, the atmosphere of your writing. I thought it was really interesting to see that Wakeful Press put up a page on their website which actually showed some of the original cover concepts for The Teeth of the Slow Machine. And with each of the cover concepts included a little bit of your thoughts on each one. And there was one particular cover where I think, or to quote you, you said, "The more I look at it, the more I love it. The nod to surrealism, Dadaism, suits the stories perfectly." So, which I thought that was an interesting take to refer to surrealism and Dadaism with regards to your short stories. But I also believe that in reference to another one of your covers, you actually mentioned the word menace. There was a certain menace to the style, or at least a subtle menace underlying the style. And I think that was a word that I really agreed with when it comes to discussing your work, because for me, the stories that I've read so far, I don't know, I wouldn't necessarily say there's a menace from my perspective, but I think for me, I felt perhaps a silent, quiet, unsettling promise that may or may not be broken, and what is unsettling about that promise remains vague. And I don't know how you did it, but you do it so magically. How would you describe your approach to writing? What's the atmosphere that you feel you bring for readers?
Well, thanks for saying that, Darren. I love that as a summation of some of the moods of the stories. I think I'd like to think that the stories in the collection are a bit surreal and are a bit menacing, and I think those effects probably come from a bit of an intention to have my characters a little bit off balance, and a little bit out of control, in the sense that there are external forces at work in their universes that they don't fully understand and they can't fully control. And that's the idea, I guess, the unifying theme of the stories in the collection. That's why we called it The Teeth of a Slow Machine. I guess we're using that word machine in a very broad sense, that we as humans are all subject to systems and strictures that we can't control, that we live inside of, and we are kind of pushed around by those systems sometimes. That's the menace part, but I think I've tried to balance that with this idea that just because some things are out of your control, or that you're living inside the machine, doesn't mean that you can't live a life of meaning and happiness and dignity. And I think the characters in the collection are trying to work out how to reconcile those things, that they are not fully in control, and yet they still have agency to live their lives in a manner of their choosing.
Well put. I find it fascinating when you talk about that slow teeth of the machine, and that feeling of, even within it, we can find some representation of beauty. But I was also, one of the things that surprised me is one of the tales that I read, and I think it was the first time the actual symbolism of the slow teeth of the machine came into one of your phrases. The setting was actually a beautiful setting, and yet the story had that underlying unsettling feeling, which by all rights it shouldn't have had. because there was nothing there to indicate anything unsettling, and yet somehow you capture this mood. And I had to put the book down and go, how are you doing this? I'm not sure how you are doing this. And yeah, I think, the Dadaism, I'd be curious as to your thoughts, how Dadaism falls into that, in the sense, obviously there's absurdity to a lot of aspects of life in general on a philosophical level, but I'm still curious, where does the desire to try, and I assume there's a desire to try and encapsulate that discomfort without referencing the discomfort, how do you manage it, and how did you find yourself striving to do that?
Well, I think to take the example of the story, I think you're alluding to, which is
obviously I don't want to reveal too much for the listeners as far as plot, but
no spoilers, but it's a story called Pigface, and as you say, it's a beautiful natural setting for that story, but I guess the character in that story feels almost as if her beautiful surrounds are a bit of a prison for her, just because of the circumstances that she finds herself in. Not literally a prison; she could leave whenever she wanted, but she feels trapped. And I think it's that juxtaposition, I guess, between the beautiful open setting and the internal feeling that the character has that provides the tension in that story. So yeah, with the just going back to the covers, I think the cover that we eventually settled on was a photo by a 1920s surrealist Dadaist artist called Man Ray, and the photo is called The Feather, and it's a pretty ambiguous, maybe menacing kind of photograph, and I think the cover designer Duncan Blatchford just nailed it. It was just perfect for the collection. So that was nothing to do with me. It was all Duncan's great work. But as soon as Joe and I saw that, it just spoke to us. So cover design can be nerve-wracking when it's out of your hands, but I got so lucky, I think.
Well, absolutely, it is striking, and I would never have picked the image as a feather, but now that you've mentioned the source of the image, the colour scheme I can see is coming from very back early photographic days, that rusty sort of colour. But I was just curious that you did say, when you were looking at the covers and on that page and your notes and thoughts on each cover, that you did say that the Dadaism surrealism suits the stories. And have you had a love for those sort of mediums or those expressionistic forms, or did you find yourself maybe your stories came first and then you realised that they do perhaps dance a little bit with surrealism and some essence of Dadaism?
Yeah, I think that the stories probably came first. I'm not I wouldn't say I'm an art history aficionado or anything, but I guess thinking back about the stories through the lens of those potential cover designs, I think there just seemed to be a natural fit between the fragmented nature of some of the stories that I've written and the ambiguous nature of some of the stories that I've written, and this surrealist image, which in itself almost acts as a puzzle. Like as you say, the cover is a photograph of a feather, but it doesn't really look like a feather. It could be a fang or a propeller blade or something else entirely. And I guess it just continues that theme of being really mean to the readers and and not laying it all out for them, letting them interpret as they wish.
Well, if you ask me my initial thought of what it was, it's the very first thing that struck me as this possible shadow on an X-ray, which I love that. Captures that sort of hidden, unsettling promises, I think, beautifully. Yeah. Now, reading a few stories, I have to admit that one that's titled Else or Else If, that was absolutely fascinating. And obviously, I don't want to give anything away, but I felt like you absolutely captured like a tragic warmth somehow, within what I guess is essentially a cold and clinical medium. And now I'm curious for the sort of seed of that tale. Was that something that you had since your programming days or back in your early programming days, or is it something that's come later, looking back on your programming? Or, is it a story you've carried for a while? Or because it definitely felt just so perfect in essence that, it was just put together so confidently and in such a unique form. It was, if there's ever such thing as technological surrealism, that is the nail on the head for sure.
Yeah, so this is a story that is structured as a piece of computer code that is actually a functional bit of code that you could run, and it's about illness, I guess, and this story was written and published before COVID, but I think it sort of resonates in a post-COVID world.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think again, it's that contrast between the messiness and wildness and unpredictability of the human condition, and having a body that sometimes gives you ecstasy and sometimes fails you, and there's no rhyme or reason, and then contrasting that with a bit of cold computer code that the main character is almost trying to wrap around the person that she loves, almost as a way of saying, hey, maybe I can, if I think hard enough about this, maybe I can control the outcomes of what I worry about, which of course is no one can do that, and that's I guess that's where the emotion comes from in the story.
Yeah, no, it was a gripping little read, and the feelings it gave me was, it was a character that was using technology to try and make sense of a chaotic world and try and obviously make some form of prediction, but should something happen that maybe, isn't a good outcome, then it can be a case of, well, it was never in the character's control regardless. And that's what it felt to me, and it was just such a unique take. But yeah, technological surrealism, that was a beautiful piece, yes. And it's funny because we were talking about earlier, when I was reading through those original basic magazines, the Commodore 64, the basic programming, and so that was still fresh in my mind. So then of course I read your story, and yeah, it was it's a beautiful piece, absolutely. But it was funny because I read when I opened the book for the first time and read through the first story, I was like, oh, there you go. Because back in the day, I actually wrote a short story which was basically, I don't know, dystopian science fiction thriller based around food also. And and I'm talking, of course, your story, Bok Bok. And I think that one story definitely captured that sense of foreboding that I was looking for too with my story, which was but a very different take on the story, but still about food and dystopian. So I was thinking, maybe there's something in the water of Adelaide that brings us both to these unsettling promises and with the food. But
maybe there's something in the fried chicken here. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Well, yes. Well, don't ask me about the reality of fried chicken in Adelaide. I can tell you that off air. But being that we're both Adelaide boys, well, at least at the time of recording, I know I've moved around a lot and probably will again, but right now we're in Adelaide. I was just wondering, are there any locations here that you tend to gravitate to when you're looking for a little bit of inspiration? So, for example, personally for me, I think there's something pretty magical about, if it's a cold, rainy day, that's when I like to hit Rundle Mall of all the times, oddly enough. There's just something about that, inspired thoughts about characters and maybe themes. But otherwise, I do love, Waipenga and Parsons if I can get those beaches to myself, because they allow me to just really, walk along here, the surf pounding and dig into my plot points. What about yourself? Have you got any deep connections to any spots here in Adelaide or in our state that if you really need a little bit of inspiration, you know that it's a guarantee?
Yeah, I think for me, it's the Adelaide Hills region. So for listeners who aren't from Adelaide, you can, from the centre of the city, you can drive for about 30-40 minutes and you're up in the hills.
Spectacular hills,
great wine region, beautiful little towns, many of which were settled by German settlers in the in the 19th century, very picturesque, very cool in the summer, nice and green comparatively. So I grew up as a child in the Adelaide Hills, in a town called Bridgewater. So a couple, I think three or four stories in the collection are set in the Adelaide Hills, whether or not they're sort of explicitly signposted to occur in the hills. So I think of them as set in the hills. So I think that's probably the location that speaks to me as a writer, simply for nostalgia reasons, I guess, and personal attachments. But yeah, I think the hills are a good setting, I think, because they're not really. You would never call the Adelaide Hills the bush or real country, but they're not quite the city either. They're this sort of liminal space. So I like the hills.
I think you've made a fantastic choice there, and I'm a little bit jealous that you had the opportunity to grow up there. I go through the Adelaide Hills quite often when I head out to a property I have out of bush, and so that means, from where I am down here at Seaford, that means going straight through McLaren Vale, so stunning winery, then up through Achunga, or heading towards Achunga Meadows, then obviously through Harndorf, Birdwood, Mount Pleasant. And I was pretty lucky not so long ago, only a month or two ago, I had a friend and his daughter come down from Central Coast, New South Wales, a really good friend of mine who I travel around Australia with. And so he was following me in the car and driving up. And of course, Harndorf is described as one of the most beautiful little towns in Australia, if not the most beautiful town in Australia, as far as picturesque, and it is stunning, beautiful. Yeah. But when we turned onto the main street, as you know, it's there's not a day where it's not busy and people everywhere and everything's beautiful. But on this particular day, the breeze was so soft. So as soon as we turned, of course, it's the start of autumn, and all the hundreds of different coloured leaves were just fluttering like snow. Oh, and beautiful. It was literally like being in a fairy tale. And so when we got to where we were headed, I asked my friend's daughter, she's 13, and she said she'd never seen anything so beautiful. So quite proud. It's spectacular, absolutely spectacular location. So yeah, I could see why you may have been inspired to include it in a couple of your short stories. Yeah,
you've got to pick a place, and it's as good a place as any.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there probably would have been some quite philosophical musings out there too growing up, but judging by the thought you've put into all your stories and a lot of the themes that you touch on. So a short answer, because obviously we could talk philosophy all night. I'm just wondering, when it comes to this crazy adventure called life, do you view reality as the equivalent of a beautiful, sunny and perfect day, broken occasionally by an unexpected storm? Or is life more a case of a continuous storm broken by a few small rays of sunshine?
What a great question. I think in my teenage years, I probably would have said it's a storm. But now that I'm a little bit older and maybe I've come out the other side of the center of the storm, I think there's more sunny days. And, I was talking about this the other day and saying, I think most of the time I have this kind of mood of irrational optimism, where I kind of think that somehow we'll manage to, navigate the existential crises that we as the human race face at the moment. So that's the optimism. I fully recognise that I have no kind of really strong evidence to back up that optimism, and that's the irrational bit. So I'd describe my my general outlook as irrational but optimistic.
Irrational hope, you think?
Yeah.
Well, because I mean, hope, I guess, is when we can't give any justification for it. But it is funny, and one of the reasons why I asked you that question is because of that mood, I guess, that atmosphere that comes with your writing. And I know, obviously, you were part of A Christmas Australis, and the short story that you were included in that anthology. And that I don't think I've ever had a good chat with you about that one. But funny enough, yes, I've written a dystopian thing about food. We both live in Adelaide, but oddly enough, that really resonated with me as well, because I'm born on Christmas Eve, and I lost a member of my family on Christmas Eve, and I remember, just the way that the switch flicked from, a moment of joy discovery because I was very young to, suddenly everything changing, and so that's why I was curious of your thoughts because that story really, as I mentioned, resonated with me because, the chocolate was, for me, was like, you just knew something was coming. Yeah. And so it was kind of like the chocolate was a ray of sunshine in the middle of the storm. And for me, that storm being inevitability of life to challenge and make us question everything. And so that's why I was curious as to your thoughts on that one.
Right. Yeah. No. I guess we've never really talked about that, Darren, and
which is obviously in that story is included in The Teeth of a Slow Machine.
It is. Yeah. And I guess. That story for me is about how quickly things can turn for anyone, and it sounds like you've lived that, so I don't need to tell you that, but that I guess that story, again, setting wise, it's Christmas, the kid's obsessed with chocolate, she's sneaking away to eat some chocolate. Things seem pretty light on the surface, and then something happens, and it's a different story in an instant. And I guess it's told from the perspective of a young child, so she's sort of not fully processing what's happening in the same way that an adult would, and that's, I guess, part of the story is, I kind of wanted readers to sort of finish the story and think, I wonder how that character will think about that day in 10 years' time, that was, I guess, what I was trying to do with the story, but I had no idea it was so resonant for you, Darren.
Oh yeah, no, it was, and I should let our listeners know that the story is called The Last Day of Christmas. But I just think, for me, it was such a beautifully well played, well structured piece of literature because that chocolate is the sunshine, and like you said, told from the perspective of a young child, even the storm that does erupt is not a storm for the child at that time because there's no awareness. So the chocolates, for me, the chocolate sunshine, keeps the storm away to a certain degree. But then over time, as wisdom grows, as knowledge grows, as we grow older, so to speak, then that sunshine becomes smaller and smaller, and so that's one way to look at it, I suppose, the way I do. So I'm on the fence of whether we're a sunbeam in a storm, or whether life is a big sunbeam with a couple of like ugly little storms thrown in. But I love the fact that reading some of your stories really pushed me to question a couple of those things. So, and equally,
I think that you mentioned that it was originally published in the anthology that you and Veronica also participated in, Christmas Australis, which was an anthology of Christmas-related
spine-tinglingly.
Spine-tingling. That's right, spine-tingling Christmas stories. But Christmas is a really interesting concept and setting, I think, for stories, because you can take it in a really snowmen and cake and happy family times direction, or you can take it in a really dark, surprising direction, and it kind of works equally well for both approaches. So and that anthology is just full of such variety. It's a wild ride. So I love being a part of that.
Definitely. And I mean, if there's a one word we can describe Christmas as, pretty much, or anywhere that it's celebrated on the planet, is emotional. And it could be fun emotion, good emotion, sad emotion, depressing emotion, but it's definitely a heightened sense of emotion at that time of the year. So yeah, perfect opportunity to explore. And I think that really was like the proverbial red wine stain on a white dress, wasn't it? That Christmas being the white dress, and so you can really bring out some interesting reflections and art. So obviously philosophical musing is very important. So I got one other question, and this is probably the biggest of them all. You are an Adelaide man. Are you a Crows or Port supporter?
That is a very big question, and obviously I'm about to lose half of my Adelaide readership no matter what I answer. But look, I'm
tread lightly.
I'm a sort of a Crows supporter most of the time, but I'm a pretty fair weather kind of AFL supporter, I must say, because I was actually I was born in Sydney. Moved over to Adelaide when I was 12 months old. So I don't remember much Sydney, but my family is a big rugby union family. So I'm an absolute crazed rugby union fan, and I can sort of take or leave AFL. But if when the Crows are doing well, I tell people I'm a Crows fan, and when they're not, I kind of shrink back into the woodwork. So.
Well, I mean, I'm a little bit similar. Again, similarities are popping up. I was born in Geelong, and then moved over here. So, technically I'm a Melbourne boy. But, hey, I'm a South Australian fan, so I like to see the Crows or Port win. If it's Port and Crows, may the best team win. But otherwise, let our fair little state take on the rest of Australia. How you can be a rugby supporter, that's for a whole other philosophical debate. I've lived in on and off in Queensland for way more than 10 years. I tried so much to get into the rugby, and when it was 22-2 and it's quarter time and there's no chance of getting back, it seems to be the continuing theme. I'd try and get in the game and think, but why am I going to keep watching? They've won already. But I'm sure that was me bringing probably caught a few bad games. But no, obviously it's huge over there in New South Wales and in Queensland.
Yeah, it's an acquired taste. I'll give you that.
Yes. Well, bring on all Australian sport. But look, okay, so The Teeth of a Slow Machine is now out, and I think is it 17 stories in the volume?
That sounds about right. Yeah,
sounds about right. Yeah. So obviously, you must be super proud. But I'm wondering, when it comes to our listeners, I wonder if you might be able to share just the journey that resulted in being published by Wakefield Press. The submission and how it felt to be find out that it was something that's going to happen, and how did all the pieces come together?
Yeah, so I guess the story starts with a guy called Martin Shaw, who's my literary agent. So I sort of got in touch with Martin, I think after one of the sort of short story competition wins, and said, "Hey Martin, I've got this collection of stories. Would you mind taking a look and maybe with a view to representing me?" And Martin graciously did agree to take a look, and he said, "No, they're not there. Sorry, let's keep talking, but thanks, but no thanks." So I went away for a year and wrote some more stories and chucked a few and mixed the order around, and I came back to Martin and said, "Martin, I've had another go. Took on board the feedback you gave me last time. I think the collection's here now." And he said, "Look, I will read it again. I don't generally read things a second time, and I never read anything a third time. So are you sure that this is ready?"
Wow, that's interesting.
And I said, "Gulp. Yeah, I think I think it's there." And thankfully Martin agreed. And said, "Yeah, look, let me see if I can help you find a publisher," which he then, spent probably almost a year trying really hard to do, and worked super hard for me. And he's just such a champion of, I guess, unsung writers in Australia. So really grateful to Martin, my agent, but eventually Martin connected up with Jo Case from Wakefield Press, and got it into the hands of Jo, and she read it and said, "Yeah, let's do this." And she sort of showed it to the rest of the team at Wakefield Press, Michael Boland, the publisher, and yeah, they agreed to pick it up and give it a run. And it probably took about a year to edit. The title changed a lot. The order of the stories changed a lot. I think a couple of stories got sort of left behind. I wrote a couple of new stories in that time. So there was a lot of work to do, but I'm really proud of the final final product, and it wouldn't be as strong of a collection without Wakefield's support and Joe's expert editorial eye.
Well, Wakefield House are pretty much an institutional powerhouse here in South Australia, aren't they?
Yeah.
So you must be, what a fantastic opportunity to be published with them. But you mentioned change in title. So I understand the original title was Third Heaven, is that right?
That's right. And there was a sort of, I guess, a narrative framework that tied all the stories in together, which was one of the things that got jettisoned during the editing process. And I think for good reason. In hindsight, Joe said, "I don't think we need this," and she was absolutely right. So, but titles are tricky. I always struggle with story titles, actually. So the title for the collection was even harder, but we got there.
Well, I think on all things considered, it's a difficult thing to do, but I can guarantee you it's easier than if you're in a band, because that usually you can spend months writing the music, rehearsing it. But when it comes to titling a track, that's where that's where you end up having fights, and it can get pretty violent. So yes, picking a name obviously is a big part of the process. But what sort of publicity have you got planned between yourself and Wakefield Press and moving forward? It's been out a couple of months, but obviously it's just got out there and it's got its wings and travelling around the world. Have you got any special events planned or different marketing approaches?
Yeah, so we had a bit of a launch party at the Wheat Chief Hotel in Adelaide.
Oh, nice.
back in March. So just a sort of pretty small thing, but that was nice. And since then, I guess I've been sort of lucky enough to have had a few reviews of the collection in newspapers and online. So that's been really nice, and thankfully they've all been kind of nice reviews. So that's good.
Always a good thing.
And just trying to do a few interviews and podcasts and get the word out, pretty organically. And I know some of the independent bookstores in Adelaide and elsewhere are carrying the book, and I'm really grateful to everyone who's got it on the shelves. So that's been great, and hopefully, a few writers' festivals over the next year or so. So the life of a debut short story writer, very very glamorous. I'm not buying the yacht or the aircraft just yet, but
well, like you said, we'll get just 100 of us together. We'll get a helicopter.
Yeah. No,
and has this really ignited an acceleration in your writing process? Have you already banging out the next volume, or is it you want to focus more on getting this into everybody's hands? And where are you at the moment when it comes to your writing now that this is taking off?
Yeah, look, the new writing has probably slowed, if anything, because trying to do a bit of promotion for this book has sort of taken some time. I've got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old at home that take up a lot of my time at the moment. So writing kind of takes a third place behind family and my day job most of the time. So I'm kind of hoping I can get back into it in a serious way, and I'm working on a novel manuscript at the moment that I've got a sort of first draft of. But but I really need to crack on and try and produce something a bit more polished. So that's the current project.
Well, it's a beautiful thing about writing, though, isn't it? The actual tapping on the keyboard or writing it down, that's kind of the end part. There's a lot of just reflecting and building that, you plant the seed, the garden grows in your mind, and, at any given time you're standing there waiting at the checkout or, on a train, wherever you might be, or at an airport, sitting in the departures lounge or on the plane. It's just I think that's one of the beautiful things about being a writer is that ability to just go into that forest, or it might be just a seedling gardening, whatever it might be at that stage, and walk around and start, flexing this way and that way and just thinking about this plot point, this, direction, this theme, this character. It's a living, breathing thing inside your mind, isn't it? And by the time the words come down, that's the end journey. So yeah, even though you've got to by the sounds of it, 3-year-old or 1-year-old, lots of things getting in the way of the tapping on the keyboard. The actual story writing can happen anywhere, and that's such a beautiful gift.
Yeah, absolutely. And through all of that excitement, I don't think there's a day that goes by that I'm not thinking about writing and thinking about stories and thinking about what I want to do next with the novel. So as you say, you can write anywhere at any time, but it's just a mental process, and the next opportunity you get to actually tap away at a keyboard, you come prepared, and it's great.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we've probably got a lot of listeners out there that are either working on short stories or about to take the plunge on short stories. And I know that, quietly in the background, I've been working on a short story portal on the website, which I'm really hoping is going to be out in the next week or two.
Fantastic.
Which is going to be, I hope will be super fun and give opportunity for, book lovers to enjoy a quick read, whether they're on their transit or whether they just want to download it for later, and obviously give people a chance, authors out there a chance to get their work, flex ideas and pop them out. So I'm just wondering, when it comes to you obviously had a big journey. Your body work is always increasing. I'm just wondering, along this journey that's led to today with your book published and people all around the world shortly about to enjoy it, was there anything you've learned along your journey from writing, short story writing and even novel writing, that surprised you or that you wish you'd known at the start?
I think short stories are wonderful because you're not limited to one all-encompassing project that takes you years and years, like a novel is. You can have a couple on the go, and I think what you develop as you keep writing short stories is a sort of a sense or a gut feel of whether a story is actually working as a engaging story or not, and it's a terrible feeling when you've spent a month writing a 4,000 word story, and you've thought about structure and you've thought about the narrative arc, and you've tried to include tension and you've tried to make the characters believable, and you've spent a lot of time on it, but sometimes there's just no juice there. And so I think the wisdom that comes with writing a lot of the things is, look, some of them just work and they're like electricity, and some of them just fall flat, and that's okay. And as you say, 17 stories in the collection, but they were probably chosen from 50 stories
Wow.
that I've written, that were written to a sort of pretty polished stage, and it's frustrating when you submit stories to competitions and journals and they don't get picked up, but that's valuable feedback, and every rejection is a once all the swearing's done and the sobbing into your laptop, once all that's over, it is an opportunity for learning and reflection and thinking, oh, yeah, okay, this clearly doesn't work, but why doesn't it work? And the next thing you write will be better.
Yeah, and especially when you've got a volume of work, then because obviously if you work on one or two pieces and they may not get the reception that you were hoping for, that can be pretty painful. But I'm guessing, or that when you've got quite a big body of work, then okay, you can sort of stand back and have a look and go, okay, did these work and why did these not work? And that knowledge, then you become self-aware while you're creating the news stories. And like you said, you realise that this isn't working, and it's gaining a lot of knowledge in that process, definitely.
Yeah, and it's it wouldn't be fun if it was too easy, would it? You've got to have a few setbacks along the way, because 100%. It makes the wins all the more delicious. So.
Absolutely. Now, as your body of work is growing, and your new book is out. Look, it's getting a bit cold moving into winter here in Adelaide, but I'm sure there's still chances and opportunities for a party or two, hopefully, even if it's like a little early night party. But I'm wondering, the next time you're at a party and someone asks what you do, are you now ready to shout, I'm a writer?
Absolutely, yes. Yep.
Excellent.
I'm a short story writer. I've got a book out. You should buy 100 copies.
There we go. Perfect. And if you had to spruik the book for our listeners out there, what subtle promises can you offer as far as when they delve into the pages of your work?
Subtle promises. Look, I think I'd like to think that readers will laugh. They'll feel angry. They'll feel sad. They'll feel confused, and ultimately, they will have the opportunity to draw their own conclusions about the stories and the characters within them.
I think that's a pretty solid, subtle promise. And I think, like I said, I'm about halfway through, but already that definitely sounds pretty accurate to me. And, just some wonderful writing, some absolutely stunning little pieces in there. And just congratulations on the release of Teeth of a Slow Machine. And, thank you so much for joining us for the Australian Book Lovers podcast, should I say. So, Andrew, where can our listeners discover more about both yourself and, most importantly, where they can buy a copy of the book?
Yeah, look, you can buy a copy of the book at the Wakefield Press website. It's also on, stocked by most of the big online retailers, Booktopia, etc. And your local independent bookshop will either have it on the shelf right now, or we'll be able to order it in for you. So if you have a favourite bookshop, please do support them. And you can find me online. I mostly hang out on Twitter. My handle is Roff Writes, all one word, ROFF and Writes. And I'm also on Instagram, and I've got a website if you Google me. So hit me up, and always love to talk books and writing.
Well, Mr. Author Andrew Roff, thank you so much for taking time to chat with me and for sharing all of the inspiration and motivation and, the little intricacies that have brought all of your writing to the world, to all of our listeners out there. Thank you so much. I wish you nothing but the best for the release of Teeth of a Slow Machine, which is now out. And I think that's probably going to be the first of many volumes, and hopefully we see also the novel that you're working on won't be far off as well. But otherwise, thank you so much, and take care, and all the very best for yourself and your family for 2022.
Thanks, Darren. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thanks to you and Veronica for making the space for debut writers like me. So it's been great.
Well, may it be the first of many discussions on the podcast, and maybe even be part of future panels. And let us see if maybe in the near future there may be a coffee and literary catch-up in the beautiful Harndorf in the Adelaide Hills.
I think, that's a date.
And then we'll do a quick little photo and make the rest of Australia jealous of all those people that aren't in South Australia anyway. But
Beautiful.
And to Veronica, when she's listening to this interview, I did promise that we wouldn't talk or make jokes about the weather in Victoria, so there we go. I didn't say anything about their funny.
We'll just leave a minute of dead air here.
That's right. Let that cold wind of summer come through.
Yeah,
no,
that's it.
No, thanks so much, Andrew. It's been an absolute pleasure, and really look forward to having the opportunity to chat with you again soon.
Cheers, Darren.
Take care.
So excellent chat by the Adelaide lads, you and Andrew Roff. Thank you very much, Andrew, for your time and your really generous input into all of the ways that you discovered your writing, kept going with your writing, got support from so many different people, had your family. I like that your mum likes your stories, but she tries to corner you to work out what the meaning is. That's good to hear. And one of the things that struck me was when Andrew mentioned shifting hats, or changing lanes, shifting writing hats, because as a practicing lawyer he does a lot of contract work and technical and professional writing, and then there is a different part of you that then goes, okay, now you have to change and be a creative writer, writing fictional stories or putting ideas down in lots of different and innovative ways, as opposed to a really technical template driven kind of writing. And I know that I have felt that myself, and not only difficulty writing, health reports and all of those kind of things and project management stuff for decades, then to try and write creatively, it took a long time for me to loosen up, I guess is the thing. But I've had an interesting experience of late where it's been the other way, where I've just recently had to write a report for a client. And in the first draft, my colleagues who were doing the beta reading, I guess you could say it, were going, I think that's a bit, superfluous. Like I have a swathe of ideas, and I had all of this beautiful a little bit of adjectival overflow perhaps, and also some of the verbs were perhaps a little bit more fiction-based than factual-based. So yes, I did have to tone down my creative voice to put it into a more professional tone. So that was interesting to know that, a lot of people are out there trying to do that, changing creative writing hats.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, I don't do a lot of neutral writing in the sense of sort of industry or legal writing, but having worked in banking on and off for a few years, and being, I guess I was, for want of a better word, going through contracts and legal agreements and loan agreements and all sorts of stuff to ensure that there was no issues at all prior to settlement. I got very used to spending all day going through, these clinical documents and reading through everything, whether it's the probate documents or all sorts of different documents. And, when I look back, I realised that writing, I appreciate those sorts of writing because it's got to be written. My feeling is that sort of stuff is written to invoke the idea that nobody has written it, if that makes sense. There is no personality behind the writing.
Yes.
It is just a neutral entity that could have been written by a computer.
Yes.
Whereas, of course, any sort of creative writing, there is a voice behind it. There is a person behind it.
And that's important when you're reading, as we talked about audio voices earlier, but the writer's or the author's writing voice, you want to hear it. You want to know whether it's a light-hearted thing or whether it's a deeply esoteric discussion of the meaning of life. Yeah, all of those things need to be there. So tell me, what was one of your big takeaways from Andrew's interview?
Well, one, I like the idea of us meeting for coffee in Harndorf at some point to discuss time-sharing helicopters. But besides that, I liked the opportunity to chat a little bit about, I guess, subtle promises or, directly relating to the conversation with Andrew, we were talking about unsettling promises, but, whatever adjective you turn to use, I like the idea of short stories, books, novels, poems, whatever, how they are, before you, as a reader, dive into them, there's that moment in time when you look at a book or read a description or, read the first couple of lines of a poem, whatever it might be that draws you into then follow it through and dive into all that there is to be found within the story or the pages. I feel like, whether we're aware of it or not, as authors and as book lovers, there's some sort of subtle communication going on as a promise, like read me and I promise to at least try to invoke, these particular emotions in you, or to ignite these areas of your imagination, or to, to make you feel this way, or to make you contemplate. Or maybe they, these subtle promises to invoke a particular stylistic experience. So, for example, a description may hint at, a well dripping with surrealism, which, of course, I'd be then sitting down and I'll dive into those pages. Or likewise with a good horror book, it might promise a whole, a certain aspect of the horror experience, because there may be a horror experience that I don't particularly, care to waste my time on. So there's that unique promise that comes with writing, and I think that promise, whether it's spoken, unspoken, hidden or whispered, it's such a beautiful magic, because it's kind of that moment where two minds meet, where I'm in a bookshop or I'm in a library or a secondhand bookshop or wherever it might be, looking or even scrolling on the internet for digital books, that it might be a cover that sends a subtle promise to me. And again, I think it's a subtle promise in the sense of a promise that may or may not be kept, but there's that subtle promise of a particular deal. And so the mind of the reader, through their art, through the cover, through their description, that's that initial meeting, and so my mind meets their minds, and is it going to be a relationship that we're going to embark on? And it comes down to the promises made by the author. So I found it really fascinating, and of course, as discussed in the conversation with Andrew, you know, I think his work really does offer an unsettling promise, and delivers in just such a sometimes dark, but it's such a beautiful and stunning way. But yeah, I just loved it made me really appreciate and sort of think for a while on that subtle promise that, you know, as a writer, I you know, do, I suppose, you know, I guess I focus a little bit when I worry about designing, you know, covers and stuff like that. Obviously, I want to send out a little bit of a promise and try and capture somebody's attention with the description of the story. But as a reader as well, I've realised that, you know, there's that brief window where the promises or communications shared that will make or break my decision to go ahead and dive in. So it's a unique, I think it's just one of those magical relationship aspects of reading and writing.
Which segues me perfectly into one of my quotes for today.
What did you, pray tell,
pray tell.
Quotes on?
So the quotes were about short stories, because I did, you know, enjoy Andrew talking about short stories. I've recently listened to some teaching by N.K. Jemisin, an American science fiction and fantasy author, talking about, you know, really getting your writing chops through putting short stories together. And I read her How Long Is It Till Black Future Month? Again, another great anthology of really good short stories. So this is by a quote by Emma Donoghue, who is an Irish-Canadian playwright, literary historian, novelist and screenwriter. And she says, the great thing about a short story is that it doesn't have to trawl through someone's whole life. It can come in glancingly from the side.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a little bit what you're talking about in terms of, you know, subtle messages and those kind of things, is that you can just slice off a little bit of somebody's life, give them a window with a short story, and just have that message, when the story's well done, really clearly placed in front of you. So yeah, there you go. What quote have you got for us today, and where did you get them from?
I'm not going to log on them from the internet. No, I'm sure everybody guessed that. No, I based my quotes today, around surrealism, a subject that I love dearly, or an art form that I love dearly.
And you know what? I think you need to have a surrealist panel and get a few more people on to talk about it. And it will be interesting to see if our listeners love it. Or how many, because I know some will, but how many of them get right into it?
Well, I think that would have to be a video one, because we'd have to have, you know, for example, one of the guests might be a goat with purple-coloured perm and flashing sunglasses, and I might talk, but I'll have my voice coming backwards rather than forwards. It'll be very, very cool.
Yeah, good luck editing that one. I'm not volunteering for that episode at all. All right, what is your quote?
So my first quote is, surrealism is destructive, but it destroys only what it considers to be shackles limiting our vision. And that is by, of course, I'm going to start with none other than Mr. Salvador Dali.
Of course, yes.
I like it.
Interesting,
So it destroys only what it considers to be shackles limiting our vision.
Yeah, broadened horizons.
There was a really, I'm not sure if I've talked about this before, but there is an experience you can do. It's a 3D VR, 3D 360 VR experience, which is actually on YouTube of all things. So if you do have some sort of virtual reality device out there, jump on and have a look. But essentially, you go into the mind of Salvador Dali, and so it's like walking into, you're inside ever-evolving animated paintings by the artist, and it is haunting, scary at times, but absolutely stunning. So yes, there you go. But Salvador Dali.
Very good. All right.
Tell me your second one, Veronica.
My second one is from another Canadian writer who is in fact a science fiction writer, but that's okay. We love science fiction writers. So this is Robert J. Sawyer. And Robert's quote is, "A short story is the shortest distance between 2 points. A novel is the scenic route."
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I thought that was quite good. And that is exactly right. It takes a lot of skill. People so often say, it was only a short story, it wouldn't have taken you long. No, it often takes months and years to get a short story right, because you have to pare away absolutely everything that you don't need and just have that message and that setting and that character so clear, with every word being important. Not perhaps quite as particular as a picture book where you only get 12, 72 words depending on how big your book is. But yeah, that's a toughie. So thank you, Robert J. Sawyer, for that one.
I think there are two completely unique styles of writing. I mean, like you said, a short story, yeah, of course, okay, by word count it's smaller, but, when you're writing a novel, you've got the opportunity to, attempt over several paragraphs sometimes to, highlight an aspect of the story or capture emotion or whatever it might be. You're not limited to one sentence, but in a short story you might be trying to capture 3 pages in 8 words just as part of one sentence. And I think of it sometimes as like for music lovers out there, you can listen to crazy lead guitars and all this intricacies, but then if you listen to a Pink Floyd song and the lead, often the lead that Gilmour will do on something like that, it may only be 4 notes, but that is the toughest 4 notes to come up with and play. And that's why there's only a handful of people that can play like him, because it's easy to play 100 notes and, a lot of them are going to sound good. It's very difficult to play 4 notes where none of them have the abilities, have the option to sound bad. And the relationship has, and it has to be, it becomes under the spotlight. So, yeah, two different styles, I think.
Yeah,
and
absolutely
both,
on point.
Both have magic to be found, and I'm sure both have stressful aspects of writing.
Yeah,
too.
For sure. You must have a second quote for us.
I do indeed. And it is from Renee Magritte, who I'm not sure what Renee did, because you know how thorough my research is for my quotes. But Renee says, to be a surrealist means barring from your mind all remembrance of what you have seen and being always on the lookout for what has never been.
There you go.
Yes.
Yes.
So imagine the unimaginable, I'll say that again. Imagine the unimaginable, or imagine all things that have not yet been imagined, is how I take it. And then your quest will surely take you into, crystal castles of surrealism.
Oh, I got a really nice quote about crystals in eyes, but it's a science fiction one. Nothing to do with this story, just reminded me. However, what we do need to remind our listeners is that if you are an Australian or Indigenous author and you'd like to list your book for free, then head to australianbooklovers.com/for-authors and send us all your details. If you're a reader and you'd like to receive our semi-regular newsletter, I have got one in the wings, but we're just waiting until we got Andrew's episode sorted. Then you can receive our newsletter, which is full of excellent Aussie authored books and always 1 or 2 books to give away. So jump on the website and join us at australianbooklovers.com/booklovers and subscribe. Now, if you want to hear or find out more, you can just go to the website, australianbooklovers.com, and Darren changes the weekly, or sometimes I sneak in and change it when he's really busy, the features of the week, the latest editions, and of course you can go through all the genres. And don't forget to look for our gorgeous little quokka, who is on our humour genre. So you can find us on the web, Twitter at Australian Books, Facebook and Instagram at Australian Book Lovers. And really that's it from us, and we'll wind up and leave you with a fabulous book review by our now semi-regular book reviewer, Naomi Shippen. So thank you, Naomi. Stay tuned and you'll hear that. But Darren, what do we need to do now? We need to say take care for now.
But how are we going to do this one?
Oh, well, maybe we just do it.
No, I'm thinking, can we be a slow machine?
Oh, all right.
So we'll have to do...
A vacuum cleaner? A sewing machine?
No.
What kind of slow machine?
Some cosmically industrial, half organic, half mechanical, somewhat rhythmic, oiled and greased and electric lit machine that speaks ever so slowly, and maybe with the power of
Your fabulous editing skills that are getting better and better.
For a while and playing with all crazy effects. It just may work or it just may not. But I'm thinking if we talk real slow,
okay,
I could do something good.
We could do that. All right. So our sign-off is to take care for now and remember to...
read more of the books.
Good luck with that one.
I'm reserving my judgment until the final product. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us for the fantastic episode number 58. Can't wait to have you join us for the next episode. In the meantime, take care.
Bye for now.
Hi, this is Naomi Shippen. I love writing in all its many forms: blogs, book reviews, and even novels. Women's fiction, suspense, and domestic noir hold a special fascination for me, but when I need a change of pace, I turn to one of Sandy Barker's delightful travel romances. Sandy's novels take me away to a world of exotic locations and sumptuous food, where there is plenty of fun and romance. Today, I'd like to review my personal favourite Sandy Barker novel, The Dating Game. While I know that reality TV isn't quite real, I was not prepared for the revelations I found in The Dating Game. The deception begins right from the start, with the contestants, known as the Does, arriving one by one in chauffeur-driven limousines, fresh from their fabulous lives in the outside world, or so the makers of the show would have us believe. In reality, the Does are already billeted within the walls of the manor, and the chauffeur is merely taking them on laps of the driveway. But the scam is about to be blown wide open by our girl Abby, roped into the muckraking assignment by the lifestyle mag she writes a weekly column for. This intrepid reporter goes deep undercover. She infiltrates the ranks of the Does to get the inside dirt on what really goes on when the cameras stop rolling. Abby sends intelligence to the outside world from a secret location hidden deep within the bowels of the manor. Her missives take the form of weekly recaps, written under the pseudonym of her acid-penned alter ego, Anastasia Blabbergasted. However, this double agent has a secret mission of her own: to write an in-depth expose on the exploitative nature of contests like the Stag, and so launch her career as a serious investigative journalist. But when things start to get real, with friendship and true love at stake, Abby considers aborting the mission she was forced to accept. While light-hearted and fun, there is always something more going on beneath the surface of Sandy Barker's stories. Her characters are real and relatable, and Sandy tells their stories with humour and grace. Pick up a Sandy Barker novel, and you'll find yourself cheering on her leading ladies as they traverse the globe in pursuit of their best lives and of finding true love.
Let's meet again when magic happens.
Australian Book Lovers acknowledges First Nations peoples and recognises their continuous connection to country, community and to culture. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and honour the sharing of traditional stories passed down through generations. We're committed to a safe and inclusive welcome for authors and readers of all cultures and backgrounds, including people of LGBTQIA+ communities and their families.